On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected
$3.5 million.
What difference at this point does circle back?
Big neutral fight then.
65 days into office, he's talking about a whole range of things. But God help us, he'll be 82 in 2024, Rowan. He'd be 86 if he was elected for a second term. I don't reckon he's got any intention to run. This is just pushing off the question, but it'll be Harris, won't it?
Of course it will be. It'll be Harris before the year is out. So it's a complete fantasy. I mean, they're living in La La land. Biden is clearly purely a front man for the Harris forces, for the Democrats. He's basically Barack Obama's, puppet.
We now officially know why Joe Biden waited 64 days to hold his first news conference. He proved, well, his mental capacity is waning, to say the least. At times, he struggled. It was almost painful to watch. I think most of America actually feels sorry for the man now, that is clearly being used as a pawn. But once you get over your sadness for him, you realize this guy's a danger to America. His inability to think on his feet, to act and speak decisively without contradicting himself, has world leaders, our enemies, salivating. Yesterday, North Korea test-fired ballistic missiles, a provocative test, not of its weapons systems, but a test of the Biden administration. Do you think after today, after this news conference, Kim Jong-un fears this man?
We're consulting with our allies and partners, and there will be responses if they choose to escalate. We will respond accordingly. But I'm also prepared for some form of diplomacy.
Folks, he had to read the whole statement. Now, that one comment you just saw there, the words, and maybe more importantly, how Biden delivered it, sums up his presidency. Feeble and weak. A brutal dictator like Kim Jong-un, like Vladimir Putin, only responds to tough talk. Well, President Trump mastered the art of that, which is why our enemies did little to provoke us during President Trump's term. And if Joe Biden wasn't acting weak today, he appeared literally to fade in and out, at times rambling on in some incoherent manner.
Let me get here. Okay. If it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, when I came to the United States Senate 120 years ago, I don't know. The middle class, hardworking people and people struggling to get in the middle class, they built America, and unions built them.
Now, with exclusive reaction to Biden's first press conference is former President Donald J. Trump. Mr. President, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Joe Biden is brazenly stonewalling, as you could see in that press conference, requests for access to these facilities. And as you heard, he has no idea when access will be granted. What's going on here, and would you get away with this?
No, I wouldn't. And we had the border the most secure, they say, in 20 years. But really, I think from the beginning, it's never been like this. We built almost 500 miles of wall, and it was new wall. You know, they like to say renovation. The renovation was we knocked down the old wall and we built a new wall, and then they call it a renovation. But this was new wall and incredible wall that was, really did a job. In addition to that, Mexico worked great with us. We had a tremendous relationship, and me with the president, who's a tremendous person. And they gave us 28,000 soldiers along our border, and they stopped people from coming in. And what you're doing now and what you're seeing now is inhumane. These children and people are a tremendous number of children, by the way, but they're living on top of each other in squalor. This is squalor. That's why they won't allow the press to come in. We let the press go in, and we had much smaller numbers, frankly, because people couldn't come up. But we let the press come in, but they're living in very dangerous conditions. There's no testing for COVID-19, as we call it sometimes. Sometimes we call it something else. But there's no testing. There's no nothing. And What's going on is just absolutely insane. It's a horrible situation. And everyone that's seen it, nobody's seen worse. Nobody's seen anything like it. And if you get cameras inside some of those facilities, you would see children on top of children, and you'd see filth, and you'd see things that you would not believe possible.
Well, I want to move on to a claim that Biden made about your administration's treatment of the migrant children. Watch.
If an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let him starve to death and stay on the other side. No previous administration did that either, except Trump. I'm not going to do it.
He was accusing you of starving people who were wanting to come across the Rio Grande or the border to the United States. Your reaction?
Well, first of all, it's just the opposite. But by the time we finished what we were doing, very few people were coming up because they knew they weren't going to get through. We stopped catch and release, which was a disaster. That's where you catch somebody, take their name, and release them into our country. We stopped that. They were supposed to come back years later and go to court, but nobody ever comes back and goes to court. And the very biggest thing was we had the stay in Mexico policy, and that means that we wouldn't allow people to wait in our country until they were totally checked out, which most of them didn't get checked out, and they would go back to their own country. If young kids were with parents, but a lot of times they weren't, and we would take care of them. But it is what they're doing now is outrageous, and they should finish the wall. If they finish the wall, they'd be able to have a lot of people are right now staying in the few openings. We have openings in the wall that were going to be closed up, could have been done over the next month. If it weren't for the fact that we got sued 11 times, many of the suits by Congress and people in Congress and Democrats, we would have had the wall. It was almost completed, but it took 2.5 years to get the final sign-offs from the court victories that we had. We had great court victories, but they sued us for 2.5 years, and they were suing us on the financing, on the environment, on lots of things. We won the lawsuits, and we built almost 500 miles. They should immediately seal it up and finish it up, and you would see a lot of good things happen. But nobody knows exactly what they're doing.
Mr. President, what was your just general reaction to the way Biden handled the so-called press conference today? You know, he read quite a bit from reference notes, but he did take some questions. It was unusual, to say the least.
Well, they were strange questions, and they were asked in a very interesting way. It was like softballs, like you're throwing softballs up, and it's just a different world. Nobody's seen anything like it. You know it. You know it better than anybody. You cover it so well, and it's very sad to watch. Actually, they're feeding him questions. They're easy questions. I noticed Peter Doocy didn't get to ask a question today, and there could be no difficult questions. And they're ready to rip the microphone away if somebody did get a little bit testy. Look, the whole thing is ridiculous. You know it, and so do I.
Well, where was there Jim Acosta?
So do
Mr. President, where was there Jim Acosta? I mean, they'd have Acosta like in your face every day, and others like him.
They don't have that, yeah. And if Jim Acosta were there, he'd ask very soft questions. It would be a whole different thing.
The Democrats are also, the Democrats are also saying that a problem here is that apparently America is not sending enough U.S. taxpayer dollars to Central America to solve or alleviate this border crisis. Here was Nancy Pelosi today.
The then president, had withdrawn the money that was allocated for the Northern Triangle. That was a mistake, and we have to restore that. They withdrew the money to punish those countries.
Mr. President, did you withdraw money from Central America to punish them?
Absolutely, that's right. On that, I agree with her. First time in a long time, years, that I've agreed with her. We were paying them $500 million a year. Nobody knew what they were doing with the money. And they were sending criminals to our country. You know, when they're sending people in the caravans, as we call them, they're not exactly their finest, okay? And more importantly, perhaps, is that they wouldn't take it as we would, because ICE was incredible, the job they did, and Border Patrol, incredible. These are incredible men and women. When we got somebody, we captured a bad MS-13 or group, we'd bring them back to the country, and they wouldn't take them. And I said, what are we doing? How much money do we give them? We pay them $500 million a year. I said, stop paying the money immediately. We stopped paying. They called the following day. They said, we'd love to have MS-13 come back into our country. Please send them immediately, and we will not be sending any more bad people. And we then got along very well with them. So she's absolutely right. They abused us in so many different ways. They wouldn't take prisoners and murderers back, and we didn't want them in our country. So we'd bring them back. They wouldn't take them. I stopped paying the $500 million that we were wasting on giving it to them. As soon as I did that, they immediately agreed to take back everybody. They said it would be a great honor to take them back. Please send them immediately.
Yeah. Mr. President, today NBC News reporting that the DHS, of course, it was created after 9/11 to protect America from international terrorism. Now, they're moving toward what intel officials are now saying is the new top threat, domestic violent extremism. That includes apparently surveilling social media. Here's what they mean. There's a quote from the article. The idea is to identify people who may, through their social media behavior, be prone to influence by toxic messaging spread by foreign governments, terrorists, and domestic extremists. Mr. President, their DHS is going after people who may be your supporters, who they believe are domestic extremists because they say things like, let's take back our government. Are you concerned about that?
What I'm concerned about is Antifa and BLM and some of the horrible things that we witnessed over the last, frankly, long period of time when they take over Portland and they take over the courthouse and they destroy the building. You have to see what they've done to the building over the years. And just over the last few weeks, they've been having massive riots and other things in Portland, and even the crazy mayor. This mayor is just absolutely, he's a radical left, and he can't take it anymore. He's actually said he can't take it anymore. You have to see what the streets of Portland look like. They've been burning the city down, and nobody does anything about it. And they don't go after those people, but they go after people that I guess you'd call them lean toward the right. And they wave American flags. In many cases, they're waving the American flag, and they love our country. And those people, they're arresting them by the dozens, but they don't go after Antifa, who kill people, by the way, who burn down our cities. Look at what they did to Seattle. They took over a big parcel of land in Seattle, a big portion of the city. And had I not gotten the National Guard ready to go in, we were going in the following morning. They just gave up the land. The same thing in Minnesota. In Minneapolis, they took over the city. Had we not gotten the National Guard in there, you would not have Minneapolis anymore. It would have been burned down to the ground.
Are you
concerned? Those are the ones you have to worry
Is
about.
Bill Clinton the best person the Democrats could have chosen to champion an empowering women forum?
Well, you could have looked for a pedophile. That might have been a little worse. But when you have a woman abuser like himself, it just makes no sense. But then it's been a day that has been so illogical from this press conference that you'd like to believe that we're looking at Comedy Hour or Saturday Night Live, but it's not. This is the real world, and that's the sadness of it all.
With China has an overall goal, and I don't criticize them for the goal, but they have an overall goal to become the leading country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, and the most powerful country in the world. That's not going to happen on my watch, because the United States is going to continue to grow and expand.
Wow, some pretty scathing words there from President Joe Biden, who took the opportunity when asked about how he will handle China to then throw Donald Trump under the bus, saying he's the only president in the United States' history to not have spoken out about what's happening in China. And while Trump did avoid punishing China's unethical treatment of Uyghurs for fear it could interrupt trade talks, it's fair to say that Donald Trump was one of the more outspoken presidents when it came to the threat of China, especially in 2020 as the pandemic emerged.
Can you tell us how they graded with the voters out there. First, there was this moment right here when he was asked if the reason that the migrant surge is occurring is because he's such a decent and moral man. Here was his response.
I should be flattered. People are coming because I'm the nice guy. That's the reason why it's happening. That I'm a decent man, or however it's phrased. That, that's why they're coming, because Biden's a good guy. The vast majority, the overwhelming majority of people coming to the border and crossing are being sent back.
So, Lee, how did voters grade that moment?
Well, look, I continue to say that Democrats are from Mars and Republicans are from Venus. You can see a complete different reaction. Yeah. Democrats gave this a B, independents a D, and Republicans an F. I'm not surprised Republicans are rejecting this, and Democrats are basically giving him the benefit of doubt. I'm laser focused on those independents, and I think they are very skeptical of Joe Biden's response here. They wanted answers on the border. They know that people aren't coming through because he's a decent guy. They know it's because he's loosening policies, and there's a problem there. They wanted answers, and they didn't feel satisfied with his answer.
All right. Something else, Lee, that we were talking about earlier was just the fact that a number of times Joe Biden was talking and then he kind of ran out of words or ran out of gas. He hit some kind of conversational cul-de-sacs. Here's one of them when he was talking about the filibuster. And watch the grades. Democrats are the blue line, the Republicans are the red line, and the independents are the yellow line.
I'm going to say something outrageous. I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done.
Okay, so we're going to get a lot done, but when you look at the grades, even though he stalled out there, Democrats gave him an A.
They sure did. Democrats gave him an A, independents a C, Republicans a D. The thing is, Democrats are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. They see that he's stalled out. They're willing to accept this. And in the sort of the way that they interpreted this is, you know what, I'm fine watching this. I'm bored. He's not dangerous. They're okay with it.
Mind-numbingly dull, or, well, went as well as you would expect.
Okay. Where am I here? Let me see.
You know those awkward family dinners where the creepy uncle goes off on an incoherent rant? Well, judging by Biden's public appearances, that's what White House staff go through every day.
It's great to be here and back in a place where, we tried it in Iraq. It's not working, so now we're going to try, in Iran, excuse me. We tried in Ukraine. My physical and mental as well as my mental fitness.
No wonder they try to keep him in the basement as much as possible. Every time he goes out in public, it's either another meme-worthy gaffe or the almost classic at this point.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think it's time for the press, our friends in the press to leave now. Thank you.
But I guess they figured they can't hide him forever. Hence the press conference. With quotation marks, because, come on, if this was any more scripted, it would be a Hollywood movie. Biden was literally reading his answers off a gigantic stack of papers. He kept flipping through them and still got lost all the time.
The reason why a lot of immigrants are coming to deliver on their promise to Americans run by CPB.
While many are beginning to see this whole presidency as a form of elder abuse, Biden himself seems really confident. He even said he's gonna go for a second term.
You also just made some news by saying that you are going to run for re-election.
I said that is my expectation.
The perception of you that got you elected as a moral, decent man is the reason why a lot of immigrants are coming to this country and entrusting you with unaccompanied minors. How do you resolve that tension?
Well, look, I guess I should be flattered.
That is the clip that Joe Concha was referring to just a couple minutes ago. President Biden fielding compliments as well as a few questions about how his nice guy image may be helping fuel the current border crisis, all during his first solo news conference since taking office 64 days ago. Let's bring in the former Assistant Secretary of Legislation at HHS, Matt Bassett, to fact-check some of the president's claims about the current situation and the actions of the Trump administration. Matt, good to have you with us tonight.
Good evening, Shannon. Thank you for having me.
Okay, I want to play something from the president today talking about children being left to starve at the border by the Trump administration. Here's what he said.
The idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, that if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let them starve to death and stay on the other side. No previous administration did that either, except Trump. I'm not going to do it.
I would imagine you have a response to that. Quite an accusation.
Shannon, that statement is a complete fallacy. That never happened. At HHS, the children in our care always received excellent treatment. It was one of our highest priorities, and we were very, very transparent about that. We allowed in hundreds of congressional visits, hundreds of media opportunities, and we would never dream of informing the press that they could not see the facilities that hired immigrant children.
Do you find, listen, it happens to presidents of both parties, that there's a lot they can talk about on the campaign trail, but once they get in there and deal with the realities of what's going on, it can often be a very different picture for them. It leaves them with a situation like this where we have these facilities way over capacity. That's not being denied. We know those numbers are true. And yet what we're being told is that it is a completely different situation in the way these children are being processed and handled and treated versus how the Trump administration was processing and handling and treating these children. What's the same? What's different as far as you can tell? Because again, as you said, we are still waiting for access. And I'll give reporters credit today who pushed on that.
Well, the reality is that once children are in the care of the Office of Refugee Resettlement under HHS, they're going to receive very good care. Now, this surge is different. It is not a process of normal migration. This is a direct policy, result of the failed policy of this administration. When the president took Title 42 and exempted children, it's important to understand Title 42 was put in place at the height of the COVID pandemic to protect Americans from COVID coming in through illegal immigration. The president exempted children from this policy, and he did so in an illegal way, and that's being challenged in court, led by former HHS Chief of Staff Brian Harrison, my colleague. And I'm glad that he's doing that, because that one policy change signaled to our friends in Mexico and throughout the Southern Hemisphere that if they can get their children here, they can stay here. That is the direct reason we have 17,000 children in our custody, Shannon. And what the American people need to understand is once they're here, they're going to get excellent care, and they should. We agree in a bipartisan fashion that all children should be treated humanely and be given great care. And we do that because it's consistent with our character as Americans. Yeah. But we also have to understand that there is a cost that is associated with this. Every child that crosses the border illegally is now costing us in temporary facilities between $900 and $1,300 a day. They are in our care an average of 40 days. That is $40,000 for each unaccompanied minor. We have 17,000 of them now. And this would be juxtaposed with an American family getting a $1,400 check in the COVID relief package. And it shows you just how radical this agenda is.
Well, yeah, the numbers are staggering of children of dollars. And for folks who missed it today, there was a reporter who's just been down there and talked about a little boy sent from Honduras alone, 9 years old. And his mother said it was because she knew that was the only way he could get in if she sent him on that trip by himself. It's heartbreaking. Matt, thank you for weighing in. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, the retail giant H&M is facing a backlash and a potential boycott in China because it won't source its cotton from Xinjiang province. In a statement last year, H&M said that it was deeply concerned by reports of forced labor and discrimination against Xinjiang's Muslim minorities. Then on Wednesday, the Chinese Communist Youth League posted this message on social media saying spreading rumors to boycott Xinjiang cotton while wanting to make money in China. Wishful thinking. Shortly after, H&M disappeared from 2 of China's major shopping platforms. Chinese state TV released photos mocking the H&M logo, calling it ridiculous. And even celebrities have claimed they're breaking ties with the retailer.
As you say, earlier this week, the UK and the EU and the USA slapped sanctions on a number of Chinese officials over the Chinese imprisonment of Uyghur Muslims without trial. Like many sanctions, though, these ones are likely to be pretty symbolic because those people, those individuals involved here in the UK are unlikely to be travelling to China and probably unlikely too to be doing much business there either. Angela?
Why detain children in an orphanage? What can be the political reason for stopping them leaving the country and sending them back to Xinjiang from Shanghai?
Frankly, there has been so much fabrication so far. So I cannot.
But you know that that's not fabricated, Ambassador, right?
It's very
You know
unfortunate.
that that's not fabricated.
It's very unfortunate. I think it's very unfortunate. It's immoral to take advantage of any particular family situation and manipulate. This is not true journalism. It's very unfortunate for CNN.
North Korea has fired 2 ballistic missiles that flew hundreds of kilometres to land in the Sea of Japan. The Prime Minister called them a threat to peace and a violation of UN resolutions. The launches are Pyongyang's first ballistic missile test since President Biden took office in January.